right. Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. You know how this works. You send in the cool stuff, and, well, we dive in. Today, we're looking at making sure that all this powerful AI actually, does good stuff,
Yeah.
benefits humanity, right? And you sent in some really great articles about this whole making sure AI and human values are, on the same page.
Yeah.
So much to unpack.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most important things to be thinking about, especially as these models, these language models, get more and more powerful. It's not just about, hey, can we build a cool new gadget? It's about how do we steer this technology in a way that's actually going to, like you said, benefit humanity. I know that's something you're really passionate about, making sure we're using this stuff for good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a challenge, right? Because these
Well,
models are getting so advanced. So how do we teach them right from wrong? That seems to be the big question in all these articles you sent over.
Totally. And there are a bunch of different approaches that people are exploring. And it's really fascinating to see all the different ways people are thinking about this. Like, how do we actually embed, ethics and values into these systems? One of the articles you sent actually had this really cool approach. I think it was the one you highlighted. It was called Direct Queue Function Optimization, or DQO. And I know you highlighted that one specifically. So what about that one caught your eye?
I think it just sounded so practical. Reading the description, it was like, okay, this is something that can actually be implemented, like a tangible way to train these models, to kind of steer them in the right direction.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting approach, and it's gaining a lot of traction. Basically, what you're doing with direct queue function optimization is you're training the model to predict the reward for its actions. So instead of just generating text, blindly, it's constantly evaluating, okay, if I say this, if I generate this output, is that going to be considered good? Is that going to align with those human values that we've programmed in? So it's almost like giving it a little conscience, a little angel on its shoulder saying, is this the right thing to do?
I love that. That's a really cool way to think about it. Okay, so I get the theory behind it, but how does that actually play out? Can you give us a concrete example? Like, how would we actually use this in the real world?
Sure. Imagine you're developing, I don't know, like an AI assistant for healthcare professionals. That's a field where ethics are obviously super important.
Mm.
And with DQO, you could actually train this model to prioritize things like patient privacy, ethical guidelines, things like that. So even if a doctor, asked for information that they technically shouldn't have access to, the AI would be able to say, nope, sorry, I can't do that. I've been trained to recognize that respecting privacy is going to lead to a better outcome. It gets that higher reward.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. It really brings it to life.
Mm.
And, thinking about DQO, it made me wonder, how does this approach kind of fit in with other approaches we've talked about on the show, like the cognitive framework? Remember, we did a whole deep dive on that a while back.
Mhm.
And it seems like, GQO and cognitive, they kind of have different philosophies about how to achieve alignment.
They totally do. Yeah. So the cognitive framework, if you remember, it's all about creating these LLMs that can engage in both deliberate, logical thinking, but also those intuitive, almost more human-like responses. It's like training them to have two minds working in tandem, which I think is super fascinating.
Yeah, it's wild.
And the idea is that this could lead to more nuanced, more adaptable AI systems that can really understand and respond to the complexities of the real world, And I think that's so important because the world is messy. Things aren't always black and white.
Right, exactly. So how does that contrast with DQO then?
Yeah.
Are they competing ideas or are they complementary? Like, could they potentially work together?
That's a great question. I think it's more like they're tackling different aspects of this alignment challenge.
Right.
So DQO is really focused on shaping the model's behavior through that system of rewards and punishments. It's about, okay, if you do this, you get a positive reward. If you do that, you get a negative reward. Cognidual, on the other hand, it's trying to replicate the complexity of human cognition. It's about building a system that can think in different ways, just like we do.
I see. So like two different paths towards the same goal.
Exactly. But I do think they could potentially work together, which is really exciting. I mean, imagine a model that uses both reward learning from DQO and that dual reasoning system from Cognidual. You'd have a system that's not only learning to make the right choices based on human values, but it's also able to think about those choices in a more complex and nuanced way.
That's amazing.
Right.
That would be a game changer for sure.
Right.
You know what else came up in these articles is LEAP, which seems to take a different approach again. I think it really emphasizes learning from mistakes. I
Yeah.
feel like, I don't know, like how a human child learns, right?
Yeah. It is, yeah. It's like giving the models the ability to, make a mistake and go, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't the best idea, and then adjust their behavior accordingly. And what's really cool about Elect is that it allows the model to identify and analyze its own errors. So it's not just blindly following instructions, it's actually thinking critically about its own actions.
So basically, it can continuously improve on its own without needing constant human intervention.
Exactly. Which is huge because we can't babysit these AIs forever. We need them to be able to learn and adapt on their own. And Leap seems to be a really promising way to do that.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about DQO, Cognitual, LAP, all these different approaches to AI alignment. But for our listener out there who's maybe just tuning into this conversation, what's the takeaway here? Why should they care about all of this? It seems pretty technical, right?
It is technical, but it's also deeply human. This is about shaping the future of how we interact with technology, how we build trust with these increasingly powerful AI systems. And it's not just some abstract concept. These advancements could literally revolutionize every aspect of our lives. Think about it.
Mhm.
Everything from how we educate our kids to how we receive healthcare to how we do our jobs. Remember that AI tutor we talked about a few episodes back? That's just one tiny example of what's possible.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. I mean, it's exciting, but it's also a little bit daunting. This technology is evolving so rapidly.
It is, but I think that's why it's so important for everyone to be aware of these developments, to engage in these conversations. Because the more we understand how AI is being shaped, the better equipped we are to ensure that it's used ethically, responsibly, and for the benefit of all humanity. And that's really what it all comes down to, right?
It really is. And that's a great note to end on. Lots to think about. So for our listeners out there, as these technologies continue to evolve, how do we make sure they're used ethically? How do we make sure they benefit everyone? It's a big question, but it's a question we need to be asking ourselves. And on that note, thanks for joining me for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.
Bye.